John Berman here, and as we sit here this morning, the government is shut down. We could know in the next 60 minutes if it will stay that way. At stake, the jobs of 800,000 government employees, the future of some 800,000 people brought to this country as kids, and also, frankly, the very notion of competence. There is movement all over the place this morning, so pull up a chair. This is where we stand right now. The Senate reconvenes next hour, but the real action is behind closed doors. Senate Democrats are expected to meet at some point to see if they can stomach the latest proposal on the table. That proposal, an agreement to fund the government for 3 weeks in return for Mitch McConnell promising it is his intention, and that seems to be the key word here, his intention to bring the issue of immigration to the Senate floor. Is that enough for the Democrats? And moments ago, despite pleas from members of his own party and reportedly his own staff to stay out of the fray, the president is dropping Twitter bombs into the mix, writing, Democrats have shut down our government in the interest of their far left base. They don't want to do it, but are powerless. Let's go right to Capitol Hill this morning to find out the very latest on these negotiations. CNN's Suzanne Melvo is there. Suzanne, what are you hearing?
Well, John, it's going to be a very busy morning. Just within the hour or so, the Senate will gavel to session officially, and the business will begin at hand. Now, the Democrats, and as you mentioned before, the Democrats meeting behind closed doors. The time was supposed to be around 10 o'clock. It could slip a bit here. That is the key meeting to note, because that is where you're going to have Senator Chuck Schumer with all of the Democrats to talk about McConnell's latest proposal here. So you've got folks like the 5 Democrats who said, yes, okay, let's go forward with this temporary spending, like Senator McCaskill in a very tough re-election race. But you also have people like Senator Richard Blumenthal, who I spoke with this morning, who looks at the McConnell plan here and says that it is a ploy, that it is a empty promise, that he does not believe this. And so everyone along the spectrum here, can they actually go ahead and keep it from that 60 supermajority from McConnell to move the government forward? So that is where we are, from the liberal as well as the conservative and moderate members meeting behind closed doors. Later, what we're going to see is it is going to go to a full vote, and that is going to happen around noon. And the big question is whether or not you are going to have that supermajority. You've had some of the Republicans peel off, like Senator Lindsey Graham and Jeff Flake. You've had some Democrats that have moved along as well. So those are the big questions. The Democrats who've been talking to and holding out on this, what is the main concern here? Well, one of them is the DACA plan, the proposal here. They want something, McConnell says, perhaps we'll bring it up and maybe get something later after that 3-week extension. They want something before the 3-week extension. They also want a commitment that President Trump doesn't interfere in this process. That is a hard commitment for anybody to say that that is not going to be the case. They also want a commitment of a bipartisan proposal, the one that was introduced by Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham, to be the basis, the text, the base text, if you will, of any kind of legislation that comes forward protecting the Dreamers or immigration reform on the floor and then on to the House. Furthermore, they want a real commitment, a binding commitment, that the House is actually going to take this up after the Senate. It is far from certain, and certainly Speaker Paul Ryan not indicating that that is necessarily any kind of guarantee that they have the appetite for that. And so therefore, you see a lot of Democrats kind of balking at the idea that the majority leader can bring this forward in any kind of serious way. So we'll see how it all plays out around noon.
All right, Suzanne Melvo for us on Capitol Hill. Again, one notable thing, the Democrats were supposed to be meeting at 10. That meeting is sliding. Why? They want more time for what? That will be a key question this morning. Let's go to the White House right now, because we're getting some new developments out of the White House. CNN's Caitlin Collins is there, and you just spoke to a presidential aide, a top aide, trying to give you a sense of how much, and I think this is important, how much the president is doing this morning.
Yeah, that's right, John. Mark Short, who is the Legislative Affairs Director here at the White House, said today that the White House has been in touch with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, with Democrats, and he said that the president does have meetings today. And he offered that information after a weekend where the president was largely on the sidelines here at the White House, not making any public remarks about the government shutdown, and mainly while the White House was blaming Democrats, putting all the blame for this shutdown squarely on their shoulders. The president didn't make any public appearances appearances, but he did make a rare trip to the press secretary's office on Saturday to compliment several of the aides on their TV appearances and to say that he believed Democrats had overplayed their hand this time and were simply trying to appease a small portion of their base. Now, the president continued to hammer Democrats this morning with his first tweet of the day on the shutdown, and he wrote, "The Democrats are turning down services and security for citizens in favor of services and security for non-citizens. Not good." But the fact of the matter here, John, is the president has not made a public appearance since the government shut down. He has not held a meeting at the White House since Friday, and his main message on Twitter has been to get rid of the Senate filibuster rule, which is something that Republicans have largely rejected. So we're keeping an eye on all of that today and waiting to see if the president gets more involved in these negotiations on Capitol Hill. But right now it seems that the White House and senators prefer that the president stays out of what's going on here, John.
All right, Caitlin Collins for us at the White House. That insistence of just how busy the president is this morning is notable. Let us discuss that. Joining me this morning, CNN political analyst April Ryan and Julie Hirschfeld Davis and Caitlin Huey-Burns, national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. And Julie, I want to start with you on this very notion that we just got from Caitlin at the White House, because you have a fascinating article in the paper this morning. Let me read just a small snippet of what you wrote about what the feeling is on Capitol Hill and perhaps in the administration itself. The president was either unwilling or unable to articulate the immigration policy he wanted, much less understand the nuances of what it would involve. Add that to the sentiment we're getting from some people on the Hill saying we'd much rather the president stay out of this. What's the effect here?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that people on Capitol Hill, particularly Republicans, but Democrats as well, want the president out of this, because it's not been clear throughout this process what his bottom line is, what he's really willing to accept versus what he's not. Every time Democrats and some of the moderate Republicans who have been trying to drive toward a deal on the Dreamers and DACA think that they've got that sense, it gets pulled back by a staff member at the White House, John Kelly or Steve Miller, and really it makes it impossible for them to figure out a path forward on this issue that Democrats have really decided they're not willing to go forward on funding until they figure out how it's going to end. They don't necessarily need to include it in the deal, but they need to know what the path forward looks like, and right now the president isn't really weighing in to show them what that looks like.
It certainly feels like the president's watching the coverage over the last few hours, seeing that he's not that involved. He's staying on the sidelines, so he puts his aides out this morning to say how busy he is so we can get, those words on the screen right there, top Trump aide, Trump to hold meetings today. It is interesting to see the action and reaction there. Caitlin, Republicans I talk to are spinning the notion that they think they are winning this shutdown, or at least not losing this shutdown. And they point to this latest CNN poll in the answer to this question, which is more important, avoiding a shutdown or continuing DACA. 56% say avoiding a shutdown is more important, than just 34% say that continuing DACA is more important. Are you picking this up from Republicans, that they like where they are?
Yeah, and in many ways, Democrats are divided on this a little bit. You did have a handful of Democrats from states that Trump won overwhelmingly go ahead and support the continuing resolution on Friday. And you've had a lot of Democrats who are saying, okay, is this the best way to move forward with this? I think, the Democrats are kind of in this position where they have to recognize kind of political gravity, which is that Republicans control the agenda. They don't necessarily control all of the Senate because they need Democratic supports and Democratic votes, which is where they think they have leverage, but they do control the path forward. There is a huge trust deficit, of course, between Democrats and Republicans and their own leadership. So it makes sense for Democrats to want some kind of assurance, but what that looks like remains to be seen, because you can't really write into the legislation that we need a vote from McConnell and also from the House, which is a whole other enterprise entirely.
This is 100% about trust this morning. Democrats want to feel like they can trust Mitch McConnell's intention here. They don't trust where the White House is on the negotiation because they don't know where the White House is on the negotiation. And that's what Democrats are wrestling with as we speak when they go behind closed doors, April, in the next hour or so. They're also facing these attacks from the administration directly. We see the president attacking them on Twitter this morning, and we saw this ad, this remarkable ad from the president's campaign over the weekend. Let's play a small bit of that.
President Trump is right. Build the wall. Deport criminals. Stop illegal immigration now. Democrats who stand in our way will be complicit in every murder committed by illegal immigrants.
Calling someone complicit in murder, April, is not often a way to win friends and influence people. Does this pressure Democrats or embolden them?
Well, actually, it emboldens them. They've been emboldened since January 11th, when the president was talking about this is going to be a bill of love, and then changed the conversation when he talked about S-hole nations or S-hole houses or what have you, or S-houses, when he actually said Norway, white, versus El Salvador, Haiti, and Africa, which is brown and black. Here's the issue. Democrats are very upset, and they're trying to really push this message. And they're talking about going out today really full force at the fact that once this is over, if the Republicans get what they want, they're going to actually try to control who comes in to the United States, meaning the browning of America. So they're very concerned about this. And I mean, over the weekend, Congressman Gutierrez was very upset. Luis Gutierrez was very upset about the fact that he said, this is not about the wall. He said, you know, Schumer gave him everything he wanted, the president wanted, and he still turned away from it. And he said, I will put brick by brick to build a wall so these dreamers can stay here, because taking these kids, making them go back, they don't even know the country that they come from. So there is in a lot of Dems' minds, and they have not totally articulated this the way that the layman would understand, in my opinion, is that they feel that this is racial and it's going to control the kinds of people who come in this nation with this merit-based system that they're talking about.
And that is the longer, deeper issue for some Democrats there, maybe some Republicans as well. The shorter term issue, Julie, is this issue of trust, right? Democrats need to feel like they can trust Mitch McConnell on his intention. I will remind you, Jeff Flake and Susan Collins ended up as yes votes.
And even the president with trust.
And the White House also. There's two separate issues here. When it gets to McConnell, Julie, Jeff Flake and Susan Collins were promised votes on immigration and promised votes on things when they became yes votes on taxes. I have a quote here from Jeff Flake, from December. I'm so pleased that the majority leader has committed to bring the bipartisan DACA bill we are currently negotiating to the Senate floor in January. That didn't happen. He felt like he was promised this by the majority leader in December. It didn't happen now. So when Democrats see that, what do they have to believe Mitch McConnell's intention on now?
That's right. I mean, there is a big trust deficit here. And one of the interesting things about those poll numbers you showed before is it did seem to suggest that there was more support for keeping the government open than for insisting on a DACA fix. But that ship has sailed. Now Democrats have decided that they are going, or they're not going to back down on this shutdown issue until they figure out a way to secure a vote on a broader immigration plan involving the Dreamers. And so it's really difficult for them to accept a sort of handshake or an informal agreement. Oh yeah, we'll have a vote on that, and don't worry, it's going to happen. When this is their point of maximum leverage, they have to know, they have to figure, and moderate Republicans who are working on this as well, have to be able to secure a definite enough commitment from the Senate Majority Leader that they don't have to trust this president who has been all over the place on this issue for the past year, really, and that they know that they're going to get a vote either way. And that is not an easy thing to do in the Senate. What's in front of them now is a government funding bill, not a DACA bill. So they have to figure out a way to get from here to there.
Very quickly, Caitlin, you think we will continue to see the president somewhat removed from this process?
Well, it's interesting that when the president met with Chuck Schumer, you heard a lot of Republicans kind of griping that they were not in the room, which showed that they don't even trust the president to be in charge of these negotiations here. I also think it's really important to know that even if we do get to a position where Democrats are confident that they can get a vote on DACA, what will that legislation look like, right? Because the president, people say he's all over the map, but I think the reason that open meeting was so interesting when he said, I want a bill of love, I'll sign anything, was that was in direct conflict with everything he campaigned on. And that's why his White House aides and Republicans in Congress who say, look, we control all of everything, we should be driving the policy here, that's where that clash goes. So even if we get a government funding bill, the clash over DACA, I think, will be just as messy, if not more.
You can extend the government for 3 more weeks here, but you're guaranteeing yourself 3 more weeks of this very same battle that April's just talking about right there. April Ryan, Julie Hirschfeld Davis, Caitlin Huey Burns, thanks so much. So pay for the wall to get a deal for Dreamers. Democratic Congressman Luis Gutierrez says if that's what they have to do, then do it. How does the rest of the Democratic caucus feel? Plus, a slew of new text messages between FBI officials who briefly worked on Special Counsel Mueller's team just given to Congress. We will pour through them. And right now, new victims to face sex abuser and ex-gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar in court. But new questions today about what Michigan State knew and didn't know and didn't do about the doctor.
CNN Newsroom.
Are they getting closer to a deal? Senate Democrats meet in just a few minutes to discuss the latest proposal to end the government shutdown. Will there be progress? Joining me now is someone who really has been in the middle of all of this, Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. He was part of that 55-minute meeting with the president. So nice to see you here this morning, Congressman. Look, you were actually one of the few Democrats who voted yes on the latest stopgap measure to keep the government open. So I assume you would still be a yes on the current version, the 3-week plan, correct?
That's correct. You know, the Republicans in 2013 shut down the government over an issue they felt very passionate about, and that was health care. Now some Democrats are using the Dreamer issue, which I feel passionate about, but I don't think we ought to use any issue to shut down the government, because what happens next year? The Republicans are going to come up with something they feel passionate, then the Democrats will do that, and we're going to continue shutting down the government. This is not the way we ought to negotiate, and anybody that gives into that is not understanding the big picture of what it means to shut down the governments. You know, the terrorists don't shut down the government, but Congress shuts down the U.S. government.
You know, the latest CNN poll seems to agree with you. The public seems to agree with where you stand, at least. When asked which is more important, avoiding a shutdown or continuing DACA, 56% say avoiding a shutdown is more important. So how do you persuade your fellow Democrats here? Because they seem to be, in the Senate, the ones holding this up.
Well, you know, everybody's got to do what they got to do, but you know, at the same time, there's ways to negotiate. I've been saying since, you know, I told Kevin McCarthy back in November, you know, the way to do this is to, you know, if we have to do a CR, which I don't like CRs, I said on the defense appropriations, homeland appropriations, you know, it's important to keep this process going, but if you are going to do a CR, which I don't like the CRs, but if you're going to do a CR, get a strong commitment before to take a vote. And I told Kevin McCarthy just a couple of days ago on Friday, I said, listen, why don't you put the Goodlatte bill to a vote and then put our DREAM Act for a vote and see what happens. Let the will of the House work. And that's why I told my good friend, Senator John Cornyn yesterday, let the will of the Senate work and see what happens.
So right now, this all seems to hinge on a promise from the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He says as part of this deal, it would be his intention to bring immigration to the Senate floor. How do you tell your Democratic colleagues in the Senate why should they trust Mitch McConnell?
Well, you know, I understand. I think one of your prior guests, somebody said, you know, I believe that was part of the agreement with Flake to vote on the tax bill.
Yes.
He didn't keep his word. I think Collins, he also told Senator Collins also on the health care part of it, the subsidies. So there's got to be something that has to be agreed by both Paul Ryan and by Mitch McConnell where we all feel comfortable. I think it's got to be done before the CR expires if we do a CR. So if they don't do what they're supposed to do, then you got the CR, then we'll take it from there.
Again, you know, do you need more than just Mitch McConnell saying it's his intention? What more would you need to believe that that's real?
We got to be in a room where Pelosi and Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn all get together with the president and say, this is what we agreed to do, and do it. You know, the problem is we don't get that leadership from the White House. I mean, all we do is get a picture of the president, with all due respect, in front of an empty desk with a phone. No, if he's going to be the leader, he needs to get us back there, put us in a room, close the doors, don't let us walk out till we work in an agreement. That's the old legislative process that's worked. You roll up your sleeves, close that door to a room, and don't walk out till you get an agreement.
Well, look, Senator Jeff Flake says the exact opposite thing. You say the president needs to get you all back in the room. Jeff Flake of Arizona says, I just don't think it helps for him to be involved at all.
Well, we do know that the president has said one thing, and then his advisors will whisper to him, and then he will change an hour, 2 hours later. I understand that, but he's still the president of the United States. Just the fact of being there. But at the end, you're right. At the end of the day, it's going to depend on Congress, because this is a legislative solution that has to be worked out. The old-fashioned legislative solution where you put people in the room and just roll up your sleeves and get it done. And we got to get people that understand the border. I mean, one of my good friends, Luis Gutierrez, and other folks have been saying, we're going to give in to the hostage takers, and we want the dreamers, so we're going to give you a wall. No. I want to protect the dreamers, but I don't want a wall. I get a kick, and just like I told the president, of people that show up at the border for a few hours or don't even show up, and they're telling us what's better for the border. We want law and order at the border, but we know how to do it. Senator Cornyn and I have been working on this.
When you hear an ad from the president's campaign committee that says that Democrats will be complicit in every murder committed by illegal immigrants, is that negotiating a good faith when your campaign puts out that ad?
No, it's not. I mean, it's you're trying to negotiate, and you don't insult the people that you're trying to negotiate. If that's the way of the art of the deal by the president, I don't know how that can be successful. It's not the way to do it. That doesn't help. Those type of ads insulting the people that you want to get to the table is not productive at all.
Your last 10 seconds here, your pitch to Senate Democrats right now, are they making this better or worse?
Well, again, I don't want to speak for the Senate. They know what they need to do. I'm speaking for myself and other folks that the way to do it is if we can't attach to the CR, which would be nice if we could do it, but not shut down the government. But if we can, get a CR, get a commitment with everybody in the party and in the room, and get that commitment. And if it doesn't happen, then you still got that CR that expires before that vote.
And then you can take up the issue of a shutdown again. Then Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, Senate investigators pouring through hundreds of pages of new text messages from an FBI agent removed from the Mueller probe. Stay with us. All right, new developments this morning, not so much in the Russia probe as surrounding the Russia probe. A second batch of text messages between FBI officials who briefly worked on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team, now in the hands of Congress. Let us discuss what this is all about. Joining me, CNN Justice correspondent Jessica Schneider. Jessica.
Yeah, John, these texts, they keep trickling out. So this latest batch is 400 pages of text messages between FBI agent Peter Strzok, who worked on the Clinton email server investigation, as well as the Russia probe until he was pulled off for the anti-Trump text this summer. They were between him and an FBI lawyer, Lisa Page. So this weekend, Republican Senator Ron Johnson, he's chair of the Homeland Security Committee, he released a handful of these texts. So let me take you through a few pertinent ones. There was one February 2016 exchange, and in it, Lisa Page, the attorney, calls it unbelievable that the presidential race would come down to Trump and Clinton. Well, that's when this text comes in. Agent Strzok replied, "Now the pressure really starts to finish MYE." Now, that's an apparent reference to the mid-year exam. That was the FBI's internal case name for the Clinton investigation. So once again, raising this issue for Republicans, was FBI agent Strzok biased or influencing that investigation at all? And then there's another text, this one about then Attorney General Loretta Lynch's decision to accept the FBI's decision on the Clinton matter, essentially recusing herself after she met privately on board her plane during the election with former President Bill Clinton. So during the election, Peter Strzok texts this. He says, "Timing looks like hell, will appear to be choreographed." Well, that's when Page eventually texts back. She says, "And yeah, it's a real profile in courage since she knows that no charges will be brought." So Senator Johnson actually wrote to the DOJ that it appears by those text messages that Attorney General Loretta Lynch knew that no charges would be brought when she made that announcement to leave the FBI to handle the investigation, that she would step out of it. So in the meantime, despite these texts that have come out, Senator Ron Johnson, he's also requested that the FBI hand over messages that were exchanged between Strzok and Page on their personal devices, because all of these texts are from their FBI devices. Senator Johnson says that some of those might contain official business. And one more thing here, John. Senator Ron Johnson, he says he wants more info on what was a technical glitch that actually prevented texts that were sent between these two between December 2016, so right after the election, and then May 17th, 2017. That was the day that Robert Mueller was appointed as special counsel. There's a glitch that's preventing those from being turned over. So really, this text message issue not going away and continues to be a flashpoint for Republicans. John?
And there's another big development as well here. Congressman Devin Nunes, the Republican who's the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, he has this memo that every Republican is talking about right now, which alleges all kinds of abuse by the FBI in the investigation, in the FISA process as well. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, so this has really become an issue because Chairman Nunes and several other Republicans, they want to release what is a classified memo authored mostly by Nunes, and it accuses the FBI of abusing surveillance laws. So, of course, being a classified memo, there's now pushback from both lawmakers as well as the intelligence communities who worry that this memo could really compromise sources and methods. So far, we've heard from the FBI. We got a statement from them, and they have asked for a copy of the memo. But the FBI does say that so far that request has been declined. So the memo really, it focuses on the FBI's use of that dossier from ex-British spy Christopher Steele. It alleges in the memo that the FISA judge who signed off on the surveillance warrants for members of the Trump team, they argue that the judge wasn't given full information about the dossier, which of course, John, we've reported the dossier was paid in part in the beginning by a Republican donor, but then during the election by Democrats, including the Clinton campaign and the DNC. John?
All right, Jessica Snyder for us in Washington. Jessica, thanks so much. Joining me to discuss now, CNN legal analyst Paul Callan. Paul, let's start with the issue of the Nunes memo first. They won't let the FBI see it right now. What does that tell you? It's filled with alleged allegations that the FBI abused the FISA process, but they won't let the FBI see it.
Yeah, it's very, very strange that there's not more cooperation going on between these two committees. Now, I've heard actually statements by some Republican congressmen saying that the document may include references to the Obama administration doing things that resulted in the wiretapping of the Trump Tower. Now, we don't see any confirmation of it because we don't have the information in front of us. But whatever's in that memo, a lot of people think it's very important.
And the FBI, in theory, would be able to respond or explain or shed light on some of the issues in that memo if given the chance to look at it.
Exactly.
Any legal reason to keep it from them?
Except, as Jessica mentioned, there may be source materials that the FBI doesn't want to disclose publicly, and they want to keep it secret.
Yeah, but they're the ones who ask you to see it. So if it's their material, you know, that's what makes that whole exchange odd. Now, Paul, you think the matter of the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page is pertinent, at least for Congress to look into in their oversight role, correct?
Yes, I do. I think it's very important, John, because you have to remember Strzok was the #2 counterintelligence agent in the FBI, and he was involved heavily in the investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails, and then subsequently he's put on the Mueller investigation team. He was removed, though. In these emails, the initial batch, 350 text messages were released. Both he and Lisa Page, his paramour, his girlfriend, mistress, whatever you want to call her, who was working for the #2 guy in the FBI, exchanged descriptions of the president as a loathsome human being, an idiot, someone who it would be terrifying if he was elected president. And this individual, both of these individuals, were involved in the Mueller investigation. So I think there are some legitimate questions to be asked about them, and I think we have to look at their other emails and text messages.
The text messages also reveal they had plenty of not nice things to say about a whole range of people, including Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, Bernie Sanders, everyone. They seem to not like a whole lot of people.
Absolutely.
Right there. And there is nothing inherently illegal about expressing political opinions as an investigator, correct?
No, there isn't. But I think the critics of putting them on the investigation say that, you know, if you have somebody who is that strongly opposed to either Hillary Clinton or the president, maybe they wouldn't be appropriate people to be investigating.
And Robert Mueller did remove Peter Strzok from that.
When he found out about it, he did.
He did immediately. All right. And there is an internal affairs investigation. We may find out much more about it in the coming months. Paul Callan, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. All right. A Republican senator says a deal could be done between President Trump and the Democrats, but White House staffers are blocking the way. Can that last? Stay with us. All right, brand new this morning, top White House aide Mark Short tells CNN that the president, He's very, very busy talking to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, also the Democrats, very active in all the negotiations. Why are they saying this? Well, perhaps because of reports, including from the Washington Post, that the president is playing a game of what's called hide and tweet, taking a low profile in these negotiations, despite the fact that he's itching to get in the fray. One of the reporters who broke this story for the Washington Post, Josh Dawsey, joins us now. Josh, thank you so much for being with us. Explain to me why you're hearing that the president, up until this morning, if you believe that he's very active, has taken a lower profile.
So the president's natural inclination is to make a deal. As we saw on Friday, he had Chuck Schumer over to the White House over cheeseburgers and essentially tried to hammer out a major compromise on immigration, on budget spending, on defense spending. That was later walked back by his aides. He has a number of kind of restrictions, harder line aides like John Kelly, his chief of staff, Stephen Miller, his top immigration advisor, who really want the president to be careful in what he gives Democrats in these negotiations. So you have a number of calls from people like Mitch McConnell, from Mark Short, Mick Mulvaney, his budget director this weekend, telling the president, hold still. You know, Chuck Schumer is in a bad spot, and you need to make him capitulate, and don't capitulate yourself.
It sounds like they're worried that if he gets involved, he'll blow it. Is that what they're saying?
Well, we've chronicled this, and others have too, but the president's a bit of an erratic deal maker. He will, suddenly agree to something that he hasn't discussed with others. He will, say he wants one thing, and then he will say he wants another. He's a very unpredictable force when he gets involved. So I think they're happy that he's tweeting. He's largely staying out of public view. He's letting everyone else do the sausage making right now, or at least over the weekend, and they want that because they can control more. When he gets involved, he's uncontrollable for the people around him, and that's a tough dynamic.
The more he sees, though, these stories about him being muzzled or controlled, the less likely one would think it is to continue. That's just how we react. Now, you didn't have one. You had two fascinating stories in the paper all at once. As the president is being muzzled or sidelined here, there is a key White House aide who is rising to the forefront, Stephen Miller, 32 years old. Lindsey Graham says Stephen Miller is a problem. He's why there isn't a deal right now. Explain.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly true. Miller's viewed as a puppeteer on immigration, somewhat unfairly, White House aides would argue, because he hews very strictly to the restrictionist policies that the president pitched on the campaign trail. The president, as we saw, proposed a wall, proposed a Muslim ban, proposed lots of tough immigration policies. And then in office, he's been a bit more flexible. Stephen Miller is not more flexible. So Stephen Miller is telling people on the Hill that the president has to get a lot of these tough criteria that the president himself is not expressing quite as explicitly. What he is seen as in the White House is someone who is unbending, who firmly believes for years in these tighter immigration policies, who thinks, the more free-flowing immigration has been a detriment to the country, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to push those policies.
He's not alone, though. He's not on some island in the White House, because it seems like the chief of staff, John Kelly, at least when it comes to policy, maybe more or less where Stephen Miller is.
Right. Well, when John Kelly was the Homeland Security Secretary, Stephen Miller wanted John Kelly to have more control, particularly over refugees, on some immigration issues, because he trusted him. They were allies in some ways, and he said, "I would prefer for John Kelly to have more control than Rex Tillerson or other secretaries." John Kelly and Stephen Miller are both pushing the president to hold firm and make a tougher deal, and really try to get parts of a deal that are tough on immigration, but the president himself is more flexible.
Josh Dawsey, thank you so much for joining us. You probably published 3 stories while you were on TV with us these last 3.5 minutes. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, thousands of federal employees will not be going to work this morning. The government shutdown has not closed every federal program and agency. After first announcing it was not sure how long it would stay open, the Smithsonian found a way to serve the public using prior year funds to keep it operating. Joining me now from the newest Smithsonian Museum, the National Museum of African American Art and Culture, Renee Marsh. Renee, what are you hearing?
So, this can be very confusing for people who live in and around the nation's capital, as well as people who are visiting, as far as what's open and what's not open. And the bottom line is the shutdown in 2018 looks a whole lot different than it looked in 2013. So some agencies, as you mentioned, the Smithsonian, that organization, as well as other government agencies, have actually scoured their budgets to see if there's money they can pull from other places so that they can remain open. We know the Smithsonian Museum say that they have enough money to at least stay open through today. But I want to just break it down for people who really are confused about, so what is the deal? What is open? What's not? As far as what is open, John, Social Security services, that it's still available for people. Medicare, Medicaid, also still available. The U.S. Postal Office, or Postal Service, I should say, is still up and running. Local parks and schools still open. Airports, federal prisons, federal courts are all still open. Congress, obviously, they're working as well. As far as what is closed, the IRS customer service, they are not going to be able to operate. Most of the federal office buildings will not be open. I mean, if you do see federal workers who are showing up to work today, it's only for a matter of a few hours, simply to shut down their stations and head back home. Again, a dramatic difference, though, between what it looks like this time around when you saw all those closed due to shutdown and barriers being erected at monuments and national parks. The optics slightly different in 2018, and some people believe perhaps that's the way Republicans or the administration wants it to look. So it doesn't look as bad. We are in day 3.
Renee Marsh, thanks so much for being with us. Happening now, 24 survivors join a long list of women coming face to face with a former gymnastics doctor convicted of multiple counts of sexual abuse. We're live outside the court next. Happening now, a new group of sexual abuse survivors facing their abuser, former USA Gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar. At least 24 survivors expected to speak today as the hearing enters its second remarkable week. More than 90 accusers have already addressed the court. This comes as Nassar's former boss, the Michigan State University president, is now facing calls to resign. CNN's Gene Casares live for us in Lansing, Michigan with the very latest. Gene.
You know, John, more and more victims are coming forward. We even just heard that some had come forward over the weekend. But we're hearing new comments, new territory they're veering into today. Some of these victims are saying that Dr. Nassar's medical treatment didn't work. The 95th victim that just spoke said that she's had 7 back surgeries because what he did just didn't help. One of the victims, and the only one, was not an athlete. And her parents were medical professionals, and they were friends with Larry Nassar and his wife. She was first sexually assaulted when she was in kindergarten at his house while her parents were there, her siblings, and also his wife and his children. It all happened in the basement. I want you to listen to the strength of Kyle Stevens.
Just to have the opportunity to look your abuser in the face and tell him what he did to your life, but that you're moving on and you're going to be stronger from it. That was one of the most empowering things I've had the opportunity to do.
Now, a victim that just spoke is a student at MSU, and she said she wants to go back to school with a new president. The outcry is becoming very strong that the president of this university needs to resign. The Board of Trustees supports her, but one Board of Trustee member, Mitch Lyons, is saying no, she needs to go. He says, quote, "I do not agree with our statement of support for President Simon, as I expressed repeatedly to fellow board members during our discussion Friday. I don't feel that President Simon can survive the public outcry that has been generated by the tragedy, of even less so after hearing the testimony of these brave survivors of Larry Nassar's abuse." John?
I have to say, the courage, the bravery in this testimony is remarkable, and it is inspiring in so many ways to see. Gene Casares, thank you so much for staying on the story for us. Appreciate it. All right, we were just told to expect to hear from the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. He will take to the Senate floor any minute. We will get an update. Is there progress in this quest to end the government shutdown? Stay with us.